of junk.
Welcome to this episode of Trash Compactor, where this is part 2 of the Rebel Commando build. In this build I'll be concentrating on creating the old white dude and the black dude. So these two guys, pretty easy to do. I'm using the head of an Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. Because the Rebel Commando has a pin for the head to go on, and the Obi-Wan Kenobi figure is the peg system that goes into the body, just needed to trim the peg off, and then using my Dremel tool, and then gently drilling in to the head to create the opening. So what I'm trying to do is mimic how the pin goes into the head, so it's creating a wider slot which will then narrow. So as you can see, just testing it out, see how it fits, and then using my scalpel just to neaten up where the plastic has shredded a little bit. The Obi-Wan Kenobi head sits quite high on the body, so on the Rebel Commando I've literally taken a little bit more away so the head sits a bit more flush to the Rebel Commando's body. And then using a thinner Dremel tool and then just going in slightly just to create the point to replicate how the pin fits into the head. And as you can see, goes on quite snugly. So no Rebel Commando would be complete without a helmet. You could use a Princess Leia helmet, which does have quite a small fit to it. However, I found these Lego helmets, which are available on eBay, are the perfect fit for the heads which have got the slimmer proportions, such as Obi-Wan, Lando, etc. If they've got large hair, then you need to trim the hair away from the figure, but I don't want to do that, so that's why I'm going to use the Obi-Wan Kenobi head. I could have used a General Nadine head, trimmed it down a little bit, but the easiest thing to do is to use your Dremel, and what you're trying to do is gently get rid of the grooves that the Lego helmet sits on, that it clips into the Lego head figure. You know how they've got the little Lego pin at the top. So I'm trying to make it as smooth as possible and take away as much of that excess plastic that isn't needed. This is the first time I've tried this, so I'm using quite a wide Dremel tool, but later on when I do my second Commando, I realised the easier way is to use a smaller tool. The large tool did work, and worked successfully. The only trouble is, it did create quite a little bit of feathering of the plastic, which I then had to keep trimming away with the scalpel. The good thing about Lego accessories is that I discovered through this is that I just thought I'd try the helmets to see if they worked. I bought a selection of helmets, and all of them, apart from X-Wing pilot helmets, are a really good scale. The X-Wing pilot helmets are just a little bit too small and don't sit right on the figure or look right. So as you can see, as I'm dremeling, it's creating quite a bit of feathering of the plastic, but I just get a scalpel, trim that away. So first fitting, you can see it's starting to go on. There's still a little bit of excess plastic within the helmet, so what I need to do is to actually take that away. There is quite a lot of room within the helmet to take away the excess plastic, as it's quite thick at the top. So again, this is where I used a smaller Dremel tool and got better results. So big is not always better. So a little bit of a final trim of the helmet just to get rid of the feathering. And that should now sit quite comfortably on the Obi-Wan Kenobi head. And that makes an effective helmet. And in comparison, the colours may be slightly different, you could paint them, but the style and look and feel, personally, actually think does look actually better than the original Rebel. So for this figure, I'm going to change the arms, because in Return of the Jedi, the old dude, he's not really old, he's just got a white beard. He's one of the older Rebel Commandos. His uniform has similar setup to the General Nadine arms, and I had this General Nadine from a previous project. I used the head on creating a custom wiring pilot, where I moved the beard and used the head for that figure. I originally had put on an AT-ST pilot's helmet because I was going to make an Imperial variant, and then decided against it. So I'm going to use the arms from that figure and pop them onto the Rebel Commando body. So using the pop and boil method just to soften the arms. First time they don't come off, if they don't come off easily enough, you don't want to snap them, just pop them back in the water for a little bit. If they don't come off easily, then don't force them. So they've been in the water for a little bit of time, and you should just be able to lift them up, pull them gently, and the arm will pop out without any effort. And that won't do any damage to the arm or the figure. So the arms are off, just give it a bit of a shake to make sure you get all the water out from the body. Now to take the arms off the General Nadine figure. It's been in there a lot longer than the Rebel Commando, so these should just come off with no effort at all. Remember, the easiest thing is lift them upwards and they'll pop out. Here we go, both arms are off. So when trying to get the arms on, you've got to get this big large disc into a small hole. You could grab a screwdriver or a small blunt object and start pushing them in. But as you can see, it's just so difficult to get them in without trimming the disc down. And even this blunt object, the pointed blunt object, you can see it's just not easy to get in. You could persevere with a bit of time and eventually get it in. But I find the easiest thing to do is to just trim a little bit off each side of the disc, just squaring it up. There we are, so you're taking a little bit off the side, both sides, which creates more of a square peg. And this is easier to then get into the figure. So you can pop one end in, and then with your blunt instrument, sometimes you can twist the arm and it will go straight in. Other times it needs a little bit of assistance and you need to push the side in. This is trial and error sometimes, because when the arm goes in it will fit perfectly flush, and then other times it will go in and it will be a little bit loose. So there you go, the arm has gone in, got the peg in. Now to do the other one. Trim a little bit of the disc off each side. This one isn't going to go in without some assistance. See why you don't use something sharp, because you could slip and stick it straight through your finger. This does look quite sharp, it's just a clay moulding tool, so it is quite blunt. So there we are, pretty much got the arm in. Just give it a twist and that will then force it back in. And there we go, new arms on the figure. So the right arm, the left arm is quite secure, but the right arm, again trial and error, did exactly the same on both sides of the figure, is a little bit loose. So I will actually use liquid poly to help tighten the arm. Liquid poly is great because it sort of slightly melts and expands the plastic a little and just causes it to be a tighter fit. Be careful not to get this on the surface of the figure because it does actually damage the look and feel, but if you just get a good blob, paint it into the joint, so you're sort of saturating it so it really soaks into the joint. There we are, and then give the arm a little bit of movement, make sure you get that liquid poly into the joint. And then you just need to leave the figure to sit for a little while, turning it every couple of minutes. Just move it around so it doesn't bond, and eventually that will swell, melt around the inner workings of the figure and create a sounder bond. So I left the figure for a good 10-15 minutes, kept moving it every couple of minutes, and you can see the arm now is quite firm, holds itself. You can move it, lift it up, down, turn it round, and it will keep its shape. So now for a bit of painting. So I'm going to be using these model colours which I got off Amazon, and I'm going to be using a uniform green and a chocolate brown. I usually use the Humbrol paints, but I was ordering some new paints, saw these as a good deal. Quite like the fact they're in a little squeezy bottle, so you can just squeeze a little bit out into a tub and not be too concerned about dipping and taking paint out of the tub, the Humbrol tins. and if you do accidentally leave it up, they don't dry up really quickly, which is quite nice. They do have quite a good coverage. Some of the colours don't. For example, there's an orange I used in a different build, and it was quite transparent. It took me about 4 or 5 coats, which I'm not usually a fan of because you tend to get a rough texture with the more layers you put on. But this green and this brown works quite nicely. The green is just a tad too dark. What I'm going to do is add a little bit of gloss humbrol to it, and then start to give that a mix. And as you see, I start to mix the paints together, putting the green into the white to try and lighten the green. It looks right, but there's just it's not quite right. So this is where I'll go and add a little bit of yellow. And again, you can see the colour's not quite right, so I'm going to add a tiny little bit of chocolate brown. So I'm quite happy with that colour now. It sort of matches the uniform. And now what I'm going to do is touch up the top of the General Nadine sleeves so they match the uniform. So a little bit of colour seepage where the liquid poly started to melt the plastic, the blue of the paint on the arm. So just covering that with the green paint on the body. There we are. So just blending the paint in just so it sort of merges and matches the rest of the figure. Don't have to do the whole figure, it's just little sections. Just looks like shading. I'm just going to touch up the brown straps under the arm with a little bit of the chocolate brown. And be careful, because one thing I'm great doing is grabbing the figure, touching it, getting paint on my fingers, and then sticking the paint elsewhere on the figure and having to do more painting than I need to. So it's starting to come together. He's got his little green caps on his sleeves. The blue isn't quite right. Next thing I probably need to work on is doing the arms. So I need to make them match the vest, the t-shirt colour, the grey. But before I do that, so I've got this dark grey that I'm going to be using. Quite a nice colour, but it is very dark, so I will be using a little bit of white to lighten it. So I think that's a pretty good match. Not brushing over them too much because I don't want to have to apply multiple coats. Just being quite generous, making sure I get up to the edges and hide all the blue. I'm going to actually paint his gloves chocolate brown as well, so even if a little bit of the grey paint goes onto the gloves, it doesn't really matter. There we go, so that's both of his arms painted. And then just going back to the green, just touching up a few areas where it was a little bit thin on the top of the arms, and also where I probably was a little bit messy with the grey. So he's had a little bit of time to dry off now. Next thing I'm going to do is the gloves and paint them brown, using the same chocolate brown that I used previously. Could leave them black, but I think they look better in the chocolate brown to match his outfit. And then I'm also touching up a little bit on the belt pockets just to make it blend in a bit more with the gloves. Not painting all of the belts, not necessary, just where there's a little bit of rub. Just going to touch up his boots as well. A little bit of rub on the front of those. So, it's all dried off now. Pop the head on. I know it's Obi-Wan Kenobi, but actually when the helmet's on, you wouldn't know it was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then of course, give him his gun. However, it made me realise that these are General Nadine's hands that aren't designed for holding a gun, so he will need to hold his gun in his left hand. So there we go, there's the older dude, or the Rebel Commando with a white beard, or grey beard. He looks quite effective. So my next Rebel Commando is doing the other guy, and for this I'm going to use the head from a Lando Calrissian in Skiff Guard disguise. Reason why I'm using this head was designed for a helmet, so it's a little bit smaller. I did try measuring up the a beta Lando, Bespin Lando that I had, and the head is just absolutely huge, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to get a helmet on that. So rather than again taking away any plastic off the actual physical head for the helmet to fit on, I'm actually going to be using my Dremel to take the plastic away from the helmet. So I've popped my figure into some water just to soften the head because I didn't want to snap the pin off. So I could have left it just at that point and gone, yep, do you know what? Guy's fine, he'll do. Helmet needs to be dremeled out. But what I'm going to try and do is take off his moustache. So I'm going to Dremel out the helmet. So this time I'm using a smaller tool inside the Lego Endor helmet. Again, you could use a Princess Leia helmet if you wanted. So the point of this is just to take out the ridges within the helmet from the original Lego head. And using a smaller tool makes way more sense and was far easier. So a couple of fittings, a couple of dremelings. Give it a bit of a clean up, get rid of some of the plastic feathering that gathers inside the helmet. And there we go, the helmet fits nicely on the head. Quite snugly. So I want to remove his moustache. So I'm not going to use the Dremel for this. I'm going to use a Stanley knife. So this is quite a delicate operation. I've got my magnifying goggles here. Because it is such a small area, these are just my glasses with a little torch on. I put them on, I can hold the figure up to close to me and can work looking at very small details. So this is a delicate procedure because one thing you don't want to do is damage the nose or the lips. So this does go out of shot because I'm trying to get the figure as close to the magnifying glass as possible. And I'm gently cutting away. As you can see, it's a bit blurry because it's so close to the camera. I'm just gently trimming away his moustache. This does leave marks on the plastic, on the face. No matter when you cut into any of the moulding on a Star Wars figure's face, it'll always leave a lighter little indent in the plastic. However, I do have a solution for fixing this. So you can't really tell, but that does look, you can sort of just see slight little marks where I've trimmed it away. It's not too bad, you could leave it, but it just looks better. You can smooth it out by using the EMR Model Supplies plastic weld. Be careful not to get it on the neck. Just grab a paintbrush and then paint it over where you've cut. And what this does is slightly melts the plastic and makes it smoother. So don't get it on his nose, don't get it on his eyes. It's just his cheeks and his lips and where the tash was. And that will create a smooth look. And you would never know he ever had a moustache. Just a light coating, leave that for a little bit, will smooth his face off nicely. But do not get the plastic weld into the neck joint or you will never be able to move his head. And if I stick his helmet on, you can see, looks good. I also did this with a Bespin guard a little while ago. As a tester, I'd got several Bespin guards and two of them looked the same. And I wanted to remove the moustache from one of the Bespin soldiers. So I trimmed off his moustache, painted a little bit with the plastic weld, and it went beautifully smooth, totally clean shaven, and gave me an extra Bespin guard, which was quite good. So there we go, there's my two new Endor Rebel Commandos to join my army. I had a Han Solo Endor jacket that my dog had chewed many years ago, which I'd always kept. So I took that, cut one of the arms off that to match the one that had been chewed off, and have put that on the figure as almost like a bit of a coat. So I think that makes it look more effective, and I think these two are now my new favourite Endor Rebel Commandos. So they will join my collection along with all the others. I've made a few little details to some of the ones I've done before, painted a moustache on, so moustache has gone off and onto another character, just to make them look like the group of figures that are in Return of the Jedi. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe.
What a piece of junk!